Alright, you can see here that I've turned my chair around. That means that things are about to get serious. We're just gonna have a little chat, and I'm just gonna level with you. Like Uncle Jesse from Full House. Remember the TV show? Capiche? So I serve at my church as a worship pastor, and part of my role is auditioning musicians, vocalists, and tech people to serve with our worship ministry. And sometimes the audition process can feel a little scary. Like, it can be a little bit intense, both for the person auditioning, but also for the person giving the audition.
I'm not scared, you're scared.
But, you know, the audition process really shouldn't have to be so scary. And so in this video, I'm going to attempt to demystify and de-escalate the whole process. Or at least I'll share how I try to think about the whole thing. And I'm going to say that auditions are important. And I'm even going to say that I would even audition Phil Wickham if he came to my church and wanted to serve on the worship team. Ooh, that sounds a little arrogant to say, doesn't it? Ooh, spicy. Stay with me. Okay. Auditions can be scary because of our insecurity or our pride. Maybe you feel like your skill is being tested and you're worried that you won't measure up. Or maybe you feel like the whole process is belittling because your skill is so obvious it shouldn't even be questioned. Maybe you're the person giving the audition, and that's scary because of your own insecurity. Like, who am I to judge another person's skill, especially if it's on an instrument that I don't play? And you know that you might have to give some honest critique, and you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. That stuff will keep you up at night. We tend to think of auditions solely as gatekeeping, as if it's just about measuring somebody's skill and keeping people who are not good enough off the team. And I don't think that's right. Instead, I think auditions are mostly about expectation management. Two things about expectations. They need to be communicated, and they need to be agreed to. You can't really hold someone to an expectation that you didn't tell them about, or that they didn't agree to meeting. We've all probably been in situations where somebody had an expectation of us, but they didn't tell us what it was. That'll send you to therapy. Yep, that's no good. It's the same thing if somebody demanded that you meet some expectation, but you never agreed to do that. Whoo boy, that's a mess. So if you lead a team, you might want to make sure that you clearly know what you expect of the team, and make sure that your expectations are realistic so that your team members can actually agree to them. And if you're joining a team, you're gonna want to know what's expected of you on that team, and you also probably have expectations of your own, and so you'll want to identify those and address those going in. So what kind of expectations need to be communicated and agreed to in a worship team scenario? Certainly there are expectations of musical skill, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I think there are other things as well. Let me give you some examples. How does your team communicate? Do you use Planning Center or carrier pigeons? Also, what equipment do you expect the team to know or learn how to use? How is the team scheduled? And how frequently can team members expect to be on the schedule? Also, how much time do you give team members to prepare? How far in advance do you send the set list out for the worship set? Speaking of preparation, how prepared do team members need to be when they come to rehearsal? Are you memorizing your music, or do you just show up unprepared and you all work it out together? And speaking of rehearsals, what time is rehearsal, and what is the total time commitment to serving on the team? These are just some examples of things that I would want to touch on during an audition process. And if I were being auditioned for a team, I would have some questions about these things, and I want to make sure that these things are covered. So thinking about auditions less as gatekeeping and more about expectation management sort of turns auditions around and makes them a little less scary. You start to think of auditions as showing care for the person auditioning. The process tells them what is expected of them and allows them to agree to those expectations. It also ensures that the people on your team are equipped to meet the expectations that you have of them. During an audition, I like to try to give the person auditioning a clear picture of the extent of things that they might be asked to do when they serve on the team, and make sure that they feel equipped and are equipped to do those things. Take an example of a skill situation. Say I'm auditioning a drummer, and during the audition we're going over some different time signatures, and it's discovered that the drummer is uncomfortable with certain time signatures, say 3/4 time. They play in 4/4 perfectly, 6/8, but 3/4 they're a little bit unfamiliar with. I think it's a good thing to discover that during an audition rather than discovering it, say, at rehearsal in front of the rest of the band, where it might be embarrassing for the drummer, or even worse, to discover that during a worship gathering when the drummer's playing in a different time signature than the rest of the band, and you kind of have a train wreck. It just creates an awkward situation. And so discovering those things ahead of time, making sure that the person is equipped to do the things that would be expected of them, actually shows care for that person. Even when it comes to auditioning a person's skill level, you can think about it as not just testing someone's skill, but exploring the depths of a person's skill. It's not just about seeing if they can meet the minimum requirements to serve on the team, but about seeing the extent of their skills. As an example, let's suppose you're auditioning a guitar player who is great. You've seen them play before, you know that they have the skills to serve on your team. But during an audition process, you might find out that they're actually really good at improvisation. And maybe you have a use for that on your team from time to time. Or suppose in an audition you find out that they are really patient and have this gift of teaching. Maybe they have some experience in coaching and mentoring other musicians, and you realize, hey, I could schedule this person with some of my younger team members and they could mentor and coach them. And you might not have found that out if you didn't sit down for an audition, but now you know some of the extent of their skill and you're maybe able to use that person more appropriately. These are just some examples of things that you might find out in an audition process, even if the person's skill is readily apparent going in. And I would think that these things are pretty important no matter the skill level of the person being auditioned. And that is why I said that I would even audition Phil Wickham if he attended my church and wanted to serve on our worship team. And I would guess that he probably would also want to go over these things with me. I mean, Phil seems like a pretty busy guy. Like, does he even have time to serve on our church's worship team? I mean, we'd love to have you, Phil. I'm sure we can work something out. Give me a call. So let me just share with you a little bit of the process I go through when people are interested in serving on our worship team. When I hear of someone who's interested in serving, I usually say something like, "That's awesome. Will you go online and fill out this online application?" And I tell them how to get that application. I won't go into too much detail about my application, but it collects some contact information, some information about their spiritual life, because that's really important to us. And then it asks some questions about their musical or technical background and skill level. After I get their application, I set up a time with them to meet for an audition and play some music or go over some of the equipment together. During the audition, I've started to think about it in 3 different sections. The first section is that I like to go over our ministry values together. This is just some team culture stuff, our commitment to the team and to authentic worship, that kind of thing. I like to do this first because I think it's the most important. And then if there are any issues in regard to our team's values, we don't have to waste any other time going over other things. We can stop the process right there and deal with those things before we move further into the process. The second part of the audition is going over the person's musical or technical skill. And I've identified my expectations for instrumentalists and vocalists as, this is so cheesy, as the 3 T's, I call them. Oh, it's terribly cheesy. But for instrumentalists and vocalists, our expectations are to play and sing in tune, in time, and as a team. The 3 T's. That's so cheesy. It's not that we don't ever make mistakes, but I want to know that a person can carry a pitch and sing in tune, or that their instrument can stay in tune, that they can play in time, that they can keep to the click, that they know the different time signatures that they'll be expected to play, and that they can play as a team. So that's, can you follow the dynamics of a song and play loudly when the song calls for it, play softly or not at all when the song calls for that, and can you listen to the rest of the band and play and sing with them, not stepping on another person's toes, but finding your place in the music and playing musically as a team. The 3 T's. And for our tech people, the expectations there are to have an understanding of the equipment or be able to learn how the equipment works and to have an aptitude for the role. I like to do this part second because again, if there are any skills that need to be developed in the person before they can be added to the team, it's good to just stop the process there and work on developing those skills or create a plan for that. And we don't have to waste time going over the third part, which is the mechanics of serving on the team. And this is where I go over the expectations as far as how scheduling works, how rehearsals work, and the time commitment. We talk about the technology that we use. And then I actually have written up an orientation email that I just save, and I just send that to the person when I add them to the team, because otherwise it can end up being a little bit of a fire hose of information. And so I just send them this email later, and it has the links to the websites and the apps and just kind of outlines the things that we talked about. But again, I keep it to last because if there are any issues in the first two parts, it's just kind of a bunch of information that person doesn't need to know yet. And the last thing I'll share with you is just something that I've decided to do and have tried to do throughout my time as a worship pastor, is that I have tried to make it a habit to never tell somebody no, like to never tell them you're not good enough, you can't be on the team. Instead, I'll try to lay out the expectations, what's expected of them. And then if they're unable to meet one of the expectations, we talk about what it would take to get there. And if it's a skill issue, then maybe it means that I offer to work with them or suggest that they get lessons. And if I know somebody who can teach them lessons, I'll try to send them that direction. But ultimately, I'll say, hey, here's the place that you need to be. And when you feel like you are there, let me know. Let's talk again, and let's see about getting you on the team at that point. But that way, I never tell anybody no. It's just a matter of how hard do you want to work at it, and these are the expectations. How can we help you get there if this is the right fit for somebody to serve in the worship ministry? Well, those are just some ways that I try to think about the whole audition process, and whether you are the person being auditioned or the person giving the audition, I hope that somehow this has been helpful to you and maybe made the whole thing a little less scary. I still get scared about it, but I don't think it needs to be scary. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and hey, if you have some tips that would be useful for me in the whole audition process, or some thoughts or feedback on this, I would love to hear from you. We can learn from each other. Go ahead and post a comment down below. And thanks again for watching this video. My channel is about music and adventure, so if you like that sort of thing, go ahead and subscribe down below, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. I'm not scared, you're scared. I'm not scared, you're scared. Capiche? 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 I'm not scared, you're scared.